Welcome to the show! Get ready to meet your host for the night, Arizona's very own hip historian himself, Marshall Shore!
Well, good evening, everyone. I want to welcome you to our 16th episode right here of Arizona History Happy Hour. So thank you all so much for being here. So this is indeed our second episode that we've been, or I'm sorry, the 16th episode. We've been doing this weekly for almost 4 months now, which is kind of exciting. And so the really reason why I started doing this was just because I'm normally out and about mixing and mingling with all kinds of stories, places, and people, and that's not happening now. So I was like, well, how do we start sharing those stories and continue the learning and our love of Arizona? And so that was really the reason why I started doing this whole Arizona History Happy Hour. And so it's a fun way for us all to just kind of learn more about Arizona and a wide variety of places, ways. And so my name is Marshall Shore. I do want to thank you all for being here. And, you know, this would not be possible if it wasn't through support of you all out there. Thank you all so much. We also have a sponsor in AARP, and they say the coronavirus continues to affect us all. We may be apart, but we are not alone. AARP is here in Phoenix providing information that can help you and your family. So if you go to their link, which is www.aarp.org/AZ, you can find out about, oh, I see, is Maria having problems hearing? Can everyone else hear me? So, all right, well, no one has said they can't hear me other than you, Maria, so hopefully it is just your volume turned down. So, but yeah, so it's like we've been doing this for 16 weeks, which is kind of exciting. Thank you, Shannon. So glad that I am that I am live, not just visually, but also auditory. So I do ask you, if you are watching this, if you can do me a favor, if you're watching it on Facebook, if you click on share, so that way you can share the love of what we're doing tonight as we get a chance to explore Arizona and all of its quirkiness, then please click on that and let all your friends know the fun we're having. Now, you know, there's also the chat session off to the side, but if you think of something after the fact, you can always reach out to me on email, which is hello@hiphistorian.com. You can also keep track of me on Instagram @hiphistorian, or even on Facebook, which is Marshall Shore, Hip Historian. So that way you can see what's coming up. Now, I did just send out a newsletter, and so I kind of updated some folks on some of the fun things we're going to be doing throughout the rest of the month. So that's going to be really exciting. I look forward to that. Now, what we'll do during this show is we cover a wide variety of things. So we have a special guest who is Dan Garcia from SRP. And so we'll be doing some trivia, but we'll also be talking about Little Arizona, some of those amazing little small towns that are across the entire state that have a very different flavor than what you would find in the 5th largest city in the country, just to provide that kind of counterbalance. As well as we'll be talking some music history about Arizona, as well as things from my own collection. And I'm so excited tonight because one of our listeners actually gave me something yesterday, and that's actually our featured item. So kind of exciting. And so if you are watching this, you can also find this on Twitch and also on YouTube. As soon as I figure out how to actually, I know I can get to there's a backlog of all the episodes on YouTube, which I need to go back and put in some metadata so that it's nice and easy for people to find. So I'm working on doing that amongst everything else, and just keeping our emotional state and our well-being on a very much on a high note. So my name is Marshall Shore. I'm also known as the Hip Historian. Now you might wonder, how does one get a name like the Hip Historian? Well, you know, about 20 years ago, I was working in a library in Brooklyn, and it was winter, it was cold, and I had had enough of it. And so we loaded everything up into a U-Haul. And I love this image. This is probably an image of just one of the very early U-Hauls. So luckily mine was a little bit larger than that, so I could fit a lot more delightful items into it than what I could have in that little trailer that I would have pulled behind my car. And so decided it was time to move to someplace sunny. That would be Phoenix, Arizona. And so promptly after moving here, moved into a lovely little 1956 ranch. Now the goal is to keep it to period. So even though when we bought the house, it was beige on beige on beige, I'm happy to say now it is a very simplified two-tone of seafoam and cantaloupe. Now, it was funny, actually, when we originally got the house, we had thought that it might have been red brick initially, but we found out through doing work on the house that when we pulled off the electrical panel that was put up right after the house was built, it was painted under there. So someone painted over red brick initially. Kind of sad about that, but oh well. At least now it's a beautiful seafoam and cantaloupe. And so pretty much that is what my kitchen looks like today. All that buttercream yellow tile with the matching inset buttons for the stovetop. Look at that. And then in that wall, you have that amazing yellow oven. Now, if you look at that oven, you'll notice your oven probably looks a little bit different. Why? It probably has a window in the door. So if you're baking something and you want to check on it, you've got to carefully open that door and even more gingerly let it slam. Because you know, if you let it slam and say you're baking a cake or some bread, down it goes. And nobody likes flat baked goods unless they're intended to be flat initially. Now, as soon as I got here, all I kept hearing about how there was no history here. But I knew that wasn't true because every time I went somewhere, I came face to face with so many amazing stories about people, places, and things. And so I started just talking to people and retelling those stories. And then there's that post-war boom that I think in a lot of ways made the Arizona that we know and love. All those GIs that either were stationed here, trained here, or passed through on their way to somewhere else. And after the war, they were moving here in huge numbers, and in some cases looking for a home just like mine. And then there's this man, Mr. Carrier, the inventor of not an adding machine, not a self-haircutting machine, but indeed it was something that we've all used today. At least if you're smiling, yours has been working today. Now, he readied us so that way we could get dressed up. And, you know, and I realized doing some research on him that I missed the boat last month. We should have had a celebration for Dr. Carrier and his invention of air conditioning, because 118 years ago, on July 17th, he installed the first air conditioner back in Brooklyn. And so when he brought it out here, it forever changed how we live without the environment. And so I also would like to give a shout out to the Phoenix New Times because they have given me the distinction of Best Historian several years in a row, as well as Phoenix Magazine named me the Best Bespectacled Phoenix Celebrity because I do indeed like my eyewear. Now you might be wondering, why, what is Marshall wearing? Well, tonight I'm actually wearing a really special shirt that, in case you can tell, it has lots of cocktails on it since we are indeed in a happy hour. And I've got a brand new announcement, which we'll talk about in just a moment. But, you know, I could also be wearing this combination: striped pants, polka dots, and kind of a wild jacket. Now, those pants actually are from a Phoenix Union band uniform that I have, that on occasion I do wear, but on a day like today, that thick wool is not something you want to don today. And so what I am wearing is something that was created back in 2012. On February 14th, we had a celebration for ourselves, just like we do every February 14th. It was all about centennial, statehood. And so in 2012, we were celebrating 100 years of statehood. So we did things across the entire state. And someone gave me 15 minutes on that main stage in front of the Capitol to talk about anything I wanted to. And I chose to talk about my most favorite events, that the moment I heard about it, it just grabbed me and my interest, and it still does. I love talking about it. I love learning more. And in fact, I've actually got some things that actually we'll talk a little bit later today, as well as an upcoming, because someone just gave me a couple of the brochures for this event. But it was started back in 1926 by Charlotte Hull, who was our first historian. She lived up in Prescott, and if any of you go up there, you can visit her house, which has been turned into a museum. And so she created an event called Mask of the Yellow Moon back in 1926. Now it ran to 1955 and was first held at the Algereba Shriners Temple, just down the street from the Capitol. Now, eventually this building became home to the Mine and Mineral Museum, and they got kicked out for Centennial for something that never happened. But you know what? In a couple of years, they're going to be moving into this amazing building under the auspices of University of Arizona. It's going to take a couple of years to get the building back up to code, but I am so happy to see this quirky little museum right in downtown Phoenix open its doors again. So it then moved to Montgomery Stadium, which was our first stadium right here in Arizona. And it was home to our very first bowl game, the Salad Bowl. And so, you know, what would you expect from the Salad Bowl? Why, none other than a lot of folks watching, but also some salad coming to you in a big bowl. Well, it also has the queen of the salad bowl writing in it, and she even has her spoon and fork to serve from. And it was a ticketed event, just like the Mask of the Yellow Moon had tickets. And you know, one of the things I love is that the Mask of the Yellow Moon was touted right up there with Mardi Gras as something that folks across the country should come and see right here. Why, it was said they even held tickets at the door for folks from across the state in case you happen to show up and want to go see it. Now, it was woven through the curriculum, so you had about 5,000 high school and college students performing and building to put this on. It was woven through the curriculum of just about every subject. And of course, there were multiple marching bands. You have really large sets and lots of young ladies dancing. And those young ladies were outfitted not in just whatever they had, but what I love is that it was stuff designed by students and made by home ec. Now, we've sadly lost Montgomery Stadium. Here it is in its later years. It was torn down in the mid-90s, sadly. Wish that was still around. What a beautiful space that would be today. And so I was lucky enough to find some of those dresses made by students in a box. And I was allowed to borrow them for 24 hours. And so I had some gorgeous friends put those on and join me on stage as we talked about Mask of the Yellow Moon. Now, you know, you might have realized that I'm not a very good wallflower and I needed something to stand up to those dresses. So I talked to my friend Glenn. Now, Glenn rolled into Arizona in the 50s as a sign designer, designed a lot of signs around town. Some of them still are standing. Probably one of his best known signs is Mr. Lucky's. that he designed. So there's one here still standing. There was also one in Denver that's long gone. And so the jacket that Glenn created was an homage to the Arizona state flag. And, it got me thinking, well, why just have one suit coat? So I'm actually now working on other suit coats with other artists. I'm up to 7. I've been talking to a couple other artists about some upcoming suit coats, as well as a puppet that actually is wearing a matching jacket as well. Because, whose bucket list does not include being turned into a Muppet? Well, I know mine did, and I was able to check that off. One of the reasons I always like starting with this story is because you never know where the next bit of a story is coming from. Now, there is a group called Arizona's First Families of Arizona. And so I was doing a presentation for them, and they always are so great because they always share so many stories. And when I was done, one of their members, Norma, came over, tapped me on the shoulder and said, come over here. I want to show you something in my car. We get out there. She pulls out this dress. This dress was her mother's dress from the Mass of the Yellow Moon. Now, she had programs to go along with it, so we know it was worn in either 1928 or 29. And so at that point, I didn't want to get my grubby hands on them and degrade them. So I had to pass, but I look forward to, in a proper environment, touching those pieces of paper, opening it up and finding exactly what this gorgeous dress was worn in and what number, what year. I mean, when you're talking late 20s, this is an amazing condition. Look at those vibrant butterflies, how colorful they still are this many years after the fact. And so if you'd like to find out more information about the First Families of Arizona, you can go on Facebook and look them up, or their website, which is TFFOA. So just First Families of Arizona spelled out .org. I know I've talked to some of the folks that have been watching, not realizing that they knew they could become members. And I highly suggest it. They're doing some really fun programs coming up. I know there's at least one that I'm looking forward to attending. So it's going to be a lot of fun. So check them out. Now, because it is happy hour, of course, there's a cocktail involved. It wouldn't be happy hour without some sort of libation. And so I'm actually happy to say that we have a really cool libation tonight. It is called Unearthed. Now, this cocktail will make a little bit more sense when you learn a little bit more about Dan. But so basically, it is 1.5 ounces of mezcal. And so we used in this Naran from the Carino family, an Arizona exclusive and made from cultivated agave plants, as opposed to a lot of what other places use, which are wild agave. There's also a little bit of lemonade in there just because, it's a hot day outside and you need something. There's then also this really cool Moen golden turmeric, which is roots, vegetal, herbaceous, with a soft marshmallow yam carrot vibe. Now you can get this places like Total Wine, even some coffee shops like the Roastery in Scottsdale carry this. I want to try some of this now in my very own coffee because it sounds really good. Now, if you have all those things, you're amazing. And, I am not in that boat. I didn't necessarily have all of our ingredients. But, what I was able to do was I was able to go to the Valley Ho. And so we have now, as part of the show, our cocktail consultant, PJ Vader Barron. And so let's see if I can get this to work. So all right. So let's change that. Okay, so what PJ did for me was really cool. So this little box has our cocktail in it. So there's the cocktail. And he even gave me a little bit of ginger beer. So this has already got all those yummy ingredients already mixed up, including the muddled cucumber. And so I'm just going to pour that in right there. And so the whole reason for doing this is so that, oh, and there goes the yummy ginger beer. So the whole reason for doing this is so that people could now, oh, well, there we go. We can cheers that way, or I can cheers this way. And it's so darn tasty. And so basically, with PJ doing this, what you can do is you can actually now go to when we have next week, they will already have the cocktail made up and you can go there, pick it up as a to-go thing, go home and enjoy it with us as we are sitting here drinking it as well. And so he's going to put he came up with all these ingredients and the stories behind them. I just kind of gave him the fact that we were going to have Dan on. So he created this whole thing. So looking forward to what he's going to do next week, because we have a really special theme next week as well. Not like they're not all special, but I think this one is very fitting for the Valley Ho. All right. Oh, so we need to do. Okay, so I'm very excited today because we have. Oh, and it's green. So, okay, so we're actually going to have to do it. Oh, damn. You're just talking about me showing things that are green. And okay, so don't mind my messy bar. But so this beautiful ashtray came from my friend Sherry. It is from the Cloud Club. Now, I don't know if you all have heard of the Cloud Club before, but it was really super famous. And oh, actually, you do want to see that. So, so the Cloud Club was one of those, it was a private club on top of the Guarantee Bank building, which still stands, and I'll show that in just a moment. But it was one of those super exclusive clubs that you had to, it's like if you were a member of the Country Club, if you were a member of the Elks, if you were a member of this, you were also a member here. And I love how they didn't have any ads, but I did find one ad that just said, overheard at the Cloud Club were these business folks talking, and you could pick up nice little tidbits for yourself. I also found that Dick Van Dyke had bought an indie radio station, and it was announced at the club, which would have been, I think, really cool to be there and just have all those little tidbits. And so it is actually right downtown. It no longer has that same look to it. In fact, there's what it looks like today. It's got Alexi's in the base on the ground level, but on the rooftop, it would have had several floors. One floor would have been like a gym with a sauna and everything. They were known for doing these elaborate, luxurious buffets, something that you would have seen in Las Vegas. Kind of that style of thing. And so just about every corporation wound up having meetings there. And so it was the hub of society, going there and meeting. And so all that I have is an ashtray. Sherry had some great stories, including one about how her father, who was the general manager, so her brother wanted a drum set. So her dad gave him a drum set, put it on the rooftop of the Guarantee Bank building. So that way nobody would be disturbed by all that clanging as he was learning to play the drums. Now, he also went on to open many other resorts around town as well, such as the Carefree Inn. So he had lots of experience doing this really super high quality 5-star service. So again, I want to thank you all for being here and indulging me, as hopefully you are getting indulged by some of the fun that we are having. And so, through the miracle of modern technology, oh my gosh, have we got a great guest. So Dan Garcia, who works for SRP as their archaeologist. And let's bring Dan on. Hey, Dan.
Hey, Marshall. How you doing?
Good. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Oh boy, well, you introduced me well. I'm an archaeologist at SRP. I've been working professionally as an archaeologist for 20 years here in the Valley, and I also serve as a member of the City of Phoenix Historic Preservation Commission. So I'm not a historian; I'm an archaeologist, but I certainly dabble in history an awfully lot.
Indeed. All right. So what we do is, we do some trivia. Now, it's not like your standard like bar trivia, because we don't just ask you some random set of questions and then move on to the next thing, because here it's all about fun and education. And so it really gives us a chance to go through. So we've got our 10 questions. We're going to go through those, take a little bit of a break, and then we're going to launch into the answers of some of those stories. So that's always, that's always the fun part for me, because I always learn something. And that's the fun thing, is you learn little tidbits and things like that, which you might have known, maybe you didn't know. So, okay, so you can keep track. You can either throw it here in the chat session. If you want to, you can put it over on a pad of paper if you'd like to do that. It's completely up to you how you would like to keep track of those. Let's see. All right. So, and I got to click over there. All right. So our first question out of 10. Who was the first person to settle in what is now Phoenix? A, Jack Swilling. B, John Truly Yours Smith. C, Charles Hayden. Or D, none of the above. Who was the first person to settle in what is now called Phoenix? So give you a moment to think about that answer. All right, moving on to question 2. Where was the first irrigation canal dug in the Phoenix metro area? A, Tempe on the north side of Mill Avenue at the Salt River. B, under what is now Sky Harbor Airport. C, Fort McDowell along the Verde River. Or D, Mesa northeast of the Lehi Settlement. Where was the first irrigation canal dug in the Phoenix metro area? All right. What is the oldest standing building in Phoenix? Oh, number A doesn't stand anymore. That's so sad. Steinnegger's Lodge. It was also known as the Golden West Hotel. It was also a dive bar, had lots of other lives, and now it's blank land. All right, so the oldest building in Phoenix, the Fry Building. Or could it be C, the Jones-Montoya House? Or D, the Duppa Homestead Adobe? And this is a really good question, but we're not going to tell the answer quite yet, because we have some other ones to get to before we go through the answers. Question 4, who is considered to be the mother of Phoenix? Is it A, Rose Mofford, B, Trinidad Escalante, C, Winnie Ruth Judd, or D, Rachel Emma Allen Berry? Which one of those women is considered to be the mother of Phoenix? All right, and here we're at the halfway point. So, question 5. Which historic watering hole was built at the site of an ancient village? A. Valley Bar. D. McKinney's Saloon. C. Maricopa Wells. Or D. Bikini Lounge. Which one of those historic watering holes was built on an ancient village? And you know, that's part of the fun, is even if you don't know the answer, that's why it's multiple choice. Just take a guess. And if you don't know the answer now, I can guarantee you in just a little bit, you will know the answer and amaze your friends at cocktail parties when we can all have cocktail parties. All right. Question 6. What historical figure lived in South Mountain in Phoenix? A. Della Tovrea. C. Boyce Luther Gulley. C. Dwight Heard. Or D. Eitoy. Which historical figure lived in South Mountain? All right. 7. Which is a ghost canal which has been filled in, but traces of which can still be spotted in the valley? Is it A, Maricopa Canal, B, Mesa Canal, C, Marmonier Ditch, or D, all of the above? Which one of those is a ghost canal that you can still see traces of today, even though it's been filled in, or has it? All right. What is the title of the person who ensures water deliveries through the SRP canal system? Now, you may have to help me with some of the pronunciation. I may botch it up, Dan. So,
no problem.
So, Mayor Domo is A. B. Ditch Rider. C. Zanjaro. Or D. Oh, I got it right?
You did.
Perfect. Okay. D. Watermaster. What would you call a person that ensures water delivery through SRP and all those canals? And we're into the home stretch. Only 2 more questions to go. All right. Question 9. What is the oldest continuously used canal on the SRP system? Is it A, the Tempe Canal, B, Salt River Canal, C, the Turney Canal, or D, Eureka Canal? Which one of those is the oldest continually used canal on the SRP system? All right. And our last question, but before we do that, I'm going to have a little bit of this turmeric.
Cheers.
And what are you drinking there, Dan? Is that port?
Oh, it is not port. No, it is just a little glass of Pinot Noir. So I don't have all the fancy ingredients to make yours, but I'll know for next time to go over to the valley and get that.
Isn't that really cool that they said, hey, we want to do this? So yeah, I mean, so it's going to be so much fun with PJ. And I think we're actually going to, for next week, do like a whole little, like kind of a little pre-video and everything else to kind of tantalize folks. Because I think next week will be really kind of really cool. All right.
Can't
so
wait.
Question 10 before we diverge and miss the whole boat. All right. What picturesque road stood in for the Burma Road in the 1960 film, The Mountain Road, starring Jimmy Stewart? A, Oak Creek River, or State Road 89. That's a beautiful road. B, Horse Mesa Road, Frontage Road 80. C, Apache Trail, State Road 88, another beautiful trail. Or D, Old Trails Highway, or Old Route 66, which a lot of you have probably been on a little bit, because, you know, we have more of it than any place else in the country. So which one of those roads do you think stood in for Burma Road in that 1960 Jimmy Stewart film, The Mountain Road? All right. So we're going to take a little break while you get your kind of thoughts collected. Get ready for those answers. And so we're going to talk a little bit about some Arizona music. And so as we talked about Mask of the Yellow Moon, so we're going to talk about Ferde Groffe's Valley of the Sun Suite. Now, Valley of the Sun Suite was actually commissioned by the governor, Howard Pyle, by Verde, to actually commemorate the Golden Jubilee of the Reclamation, 50 years of basically SRP. And so I got onto it because of just my love of the massive yellow moon. And, you know, I like to, when I become obsessed with something, I talk to anybody and everyone who will give me a moment of their time about what I'm currently looking for. And so a friend who actually, my friend Jenny, who was actually on a few weeks ago talking about vintage clothing, she called me up one day and said, you know, what are you doing? And I'm like, I'm sitting here in my house. She's like, you're coming to see me, aren't you? So I went to go see her, and she gave me this thick metal envelope, and inside was a photocopy of Valley of the Sun Suite it was a photocopy of that original score by Freddie Groffet.
Wow.
And then it got me going, well, why was it here? How did it get here? Come to find out, in the 90s, actually SRP had it played for one of their anniversaries. They commissioned the Phoenix Symphony to play it. And so I then decided, it's like, okay, then I became even more obsessed by it. And so I actually, at that point, blogged about it a little bit. And so I had a young man reach out to me from California, and he said, you know, there's this whole group of folks that what we do is we take classic scores from composers and kind of tweak them, make them a little bit more modern. And so he said, you know, if you can send me a photocopy of that photocopy, he tweaked it a little bit, kind of made it his own, and various orchestras throughout Southern California have now been playing Valley of the Sun Suite. Now, so one of the things I think is really cool about Valley of the Sun, so there's an original recording that you saw the cover of, but it was also the first stereo broadcast in Arizona, because they already had the ASU orchestra mic'd for this stereo record. And so they then basically just hooked up each mic to a transmitter. So if you had two radios, you could tune one to one station, one to the next station. And so even before stereo broadcasts were a thing, you could get this in stereo. Now, also, it was not one of those things, because when I first started learning about this, realized that it was not something that many people knew about. I've got friends who are record collectors and have thousands of albums, but they didn't have this. And so I finally did get my own copy of it, and it was given only to dignitaries. So it was a very limited press. And the copy I have was actually given by the general manager of SRP, R.J. McMullen, to Rodney Gear. And Rodney was one of the violinists, likely in the orchestra, that played on it. And so I don't know if you can see that, but it actually has their handwritten names on the back of the album. So that way you can track it back to see who gave it to who, which I thought was pretty darn cool. So there's our bit of Arizona music history that connects music as well as SRP into this. So, all right. So Dan, are you ready for some answers? Because I bet a lot of people are sitting there chomping at the bit, wanting to know what some of those are.
Let's do it.
All right. Oh my gosh. Who was the first person to settle in what is now Phoenix? None of the above. How is that possible?
Right. So I tried to throw in a loop there for everybody. I think a lot of people looked at it and they saw Jack Swilling, and that's what a lot of people think of. Jack Swilling, the father of Phoenix, the first person to settle here. But the actual answer is none of the above, because the first settler of Phoenix was actually an ancestor of the O'odham people who live around Phoenix now, the Native Americans that live here, that they would call Huhugam, which means ancestors. That person's name is lost to time, but I put in this question because as an archaeologist, I think it's important to put in the reminder that there's a history before written history and what's conventionally taught to us. And it's important to remember that Native Americans were here first, and there's a very rich history there. In fact, there's a book that's out. You could purchase it. I don't have an actual paper copy myself, but I have an electronic copy called The Short Swift Time of Gods on Earth, which is called the Hohokam Chronicles. And basically it's a written history of the ancient Hulaggam people that was written and told by mouth and memorized for hundreds of years before Americans settled here. So that's a great way to get a sense of what the history before written history was actually like here. And I put it in there because I wanted to remind people that Native American history is history too, but it's often overlooked by white Americans living here in Phoenix. There's a lot of detail in these old stories, and it's often dismissed as mythology. So I wanted to give it a little bit of a spotlight here today. Being an archaeologist, felt like that was appropriate.
Well, and I think that, I mean, with that, it's like, especially here in the Valley, people consider Arizona to be one of the newest states, but we also have such a history, not just in terms of being Arizona, but we have a long history before that. So I always think that's interesting, is that we're just layers of history upon ourselves.
We are, keep in mind, Native Americans were permanently settled here in 200 AD, and older than that, but we know that there were permanent village settlements here that early. That's a pretty deep history for Phoenix that, maybe a lot of people don't realize.
Indeed. All right. Question 2. Where was the first irrigation canal dug in the Phoenix metro area?
Right, so another ringer of a question there for you. If you saw the list of questions, you may have thought maybe in Phoenix under what is now Sky Harbor Airport, because that's what our conventional history tells us, that Jack Swilling moves to Phoenix and digs a canal, and that's where the first canal came from. But of course, Swilling shows up, and what he saw were what every other early American explorer saw here, were there were canals here already. According to autumn history, the first canal was actually on the south side of the Salt River in now what's Mesa. And that canal, if you look at it, it's a little bit of a visual illusion, because it looks like the canal goes uphill and it brings water uphill. It just has to do with the slope of the land and the landform there. But autumn legend believes that it was actually engineered by a woman called Toa Katamotsi, the white woman. And so she actually came from somewhere in the West, probably California or perhaps in Western Mexico, and that she was a woman who knew how to build canals, and that the Hulaggam who lived here didn't know how, and they had to bring her in to show her the way. That canal provided water to the major Hulaggam settlements on the south side of the river, including places like Mesa Grande, a city called Los Muertos, and what's now Mesa and Tempe. That one canal watered a whole bunch of that area. So again, just a reminder that that Native American history is really important, and it tells us a lot about what happened in the past that is not necessarily told in our conventional histories.
So before we go on, Lauren listed the name of the book you were just talking about, so that way people are interested. I did a bad version, which is the Ho-Hum Chronicles, but I was like, let's get the whole title in there, so that way if people want to go out and find that, they can. So,
yeah, I think it's for sale at bookstores. I think it's out of print at this point, but you can still find it on used books. And again, I don't have a paper copy. I've had a chance to buy one over the years and just never got around to it. But I do have a copy electronic that's a little harder to read, but it works.
Right, but at least you have a copy. Yeah, yes. There's that great bookstore in Mesa that probably has a copy of this on their shelves if we can get in there. But
Bookman's, yeah, I bet you Bookman's has it.
Yes, I bet Bookman's has it.
Yes.
So, all right. So, question 3. What is the oldest standing building in Phoenix? So, yeah, the Jones-Montoya House, believe it or not. That list, I think a lot of people may have gotten tricked by the Steinnegger's Lodge, a very sad event that happened in the recent history. Of course, the oldest commercial building in Phoenix was the next one down on the list, which was the Fry Building. And some conventional history, at least quite a few years ago, would have said the Duppa Homestead, which is an old adobe down off of Buckeye and First Avenue, I believe, right, that is from the 19th century. But the oldest documented house is the Jones-Montoya House, and this is on Buckeye Road, 1008 East Buckeye Road, I think is where it is now. And again, I put this in here because like Native Americans, there's a deep Hispanic history
to Phoenix, and it's a Hispanic history that's really in a large part untold. And the early history of Phoenix, there were people who were coming here, like Wilson Jones, who was a doctor and a rancher, who married Alcadia Montoya and settled in Phoenix in 1879. They built this house and they farmed the area around it. And that's actually the oldest settlement, or the oldest house that we know of in Phoenix. Maybe there's one that's older we don't know about, but that's certainly a possibility. And again, that Mexican settlement of the valley is not really well understood by us now. It wasn't really recorded. We have a lot of the history of what happens on the north side and what happens in Phoenix proper, but south of the river, we don't really have a good idea. There are some early accounts that mention that when the white people showed up here to settle, there were already Native Americans and Mexican settlers living here and farming. So it's part of that unwritten and underwritten history of Phoenix I wanted to draw attention to. And I think it's very fitting that the oldest house in Phoenix, the oldest known structure, is actually a mixed, was built by a family that was mixed Mexican and white.
Right. And in a few weeks, we actually have, I think in September, we have Frank Barrios on. Mm-hmm. And so I know he'll talk a lot about that exact topic of Hispanics in the Valley and Arizona. So that's going to be a lot of fun.
Great. I'm glad you're doing that. I'll be tuning in for that.
So, all right. So who is considered to be the mother of Phoenix?
Right. So B, Trinidad Escalante, otherwise known as Trinidad Escalante Swilling, or Trinidad Escalante Shoemaker. So Trinidad Escalante was the wife of Jack Swilling, who moved to Phoenix when he moved here to settle. And so she was the first known person to settle in the Phoenix settlement itself. But Jack Swilling is generally credited as the first settler. But he did come here with his wife to build a house and to establish a home here. And if you don't know anything about Trinidad, I don't know that much. I've only just started to explore her history a little bit, but she was a very inspiring woman. Not only did she do a lot for uniting the early white and Mexican populations of Phoenix and kind of getting them on the same path, but she was a very well-known seamstress. She made a lot of the clothes for people who lived in early territorial Phoenix. And she helped establish the Catholic Church in Phoenix. Now, her and Jack had built a house called Dos Casas. There was an adobe house, and you can't see it anymore, unfortunately. It's gone, and it's underneath the Motorola plant off of Washington and 36th Street. So someday they'll tear up that plant, and maybe we'll have a chance to get in there and see, as archaeologists, what Trinidad left behind for us to see.
But again, didn't they have a house up in Maricopa? Not Maricopa, wrong direction, Black Canyon City.
So I mean, they had a number of houses. They lived in Wickenburg. They lived in a few other towns. But there is one standing ruined house up in Black Canyon City, and it's on private land. But I'm told that you can contact the landowner, and he will let you visit. And that is the house that they made in Black Canyon City, and the house that Jack Swilling was arrested from and put to jail in Yuma after being accused of a robbery. Whether he actually performed the robbery or not, I don't know. That might be lost to history.
Well, I'm thinking most of what history says is it wasn't him. It just happened to be three other folks that robbed, and they just happened to be three folks. So who knows?
Who knows? Exactly.
And so much, and and that's really the case with so much history, is there's so much that is just lost to, we don't know the answer. Mm-hmm. And so that's part of the fun of trying to find those little clues to get you there. All right. So which historic watering hole was built on the site of an ancient village? Right.
So B, McKinney's Saloon. And actually, someone might disagree with me and say maybe C, Maricopa Wells was also built on an ancient village, and I'll certainly take that up with any archaeologist. But McKinney's Saloon is a real neat place in the history of Phoenix, and that map's on your screen kind of makes out a little bit where it is. But we're talking at the area around St. Luke's Hospital right now, or what used to be St. Luke's Hospital. It's closed now, but back in the day, the road to Tempe and the road to Fort McDowell forked right over there, and right at the fork in the road was a little adobe Adobe establishment called McKinney's Saloon. And this is where the early settlers of Phoenix Settlement would go to drink at night. And so I love this fanciful story I have in my head that when Jack Swilling and his friend, I don't know if he's his friend, but his compadre, Lord Darrell Duppa, are there, that maybe after work on a lot of days they'd go drinking down at the saloon. And I'd love to think that there's some drunken night where they're all sit around talking about what are we going to call this place that we're building. There they are in this bar, and they look out the front window, and right across the street is this massive Adobe Hist-O-Cam platform mound. And so, nice and tipsy, I could picture Darrell Duppa just running to the top of that mound and proclaiming that this should be called Phoenix because here the city is going to rise out of the ashes of this great civilization. Now, that's a lot of fanciful storytelling. That's not necessarily what happened there. But this is a place that we know that a lot of community meetings happened in the early times of Phoenix, and these folks were definitely hanging around there. One of the things I'm hopeful for is that area is under development over the next few years. And I'm hoping that the city of Phoenix is able to get in there and hopefully find some of the remains of McKinney's Saloon, which would be what a wonderful treat. It would be great if it happened this year as the 150th anniversary of the city of Phoenix, but I don't know if that'll happen this year. That's one of my favorite stories. No, I know there's probably some historians on the line who are going to take issue with my telling of that, but that's one of the beauties about history, I think, is that it's a story, and there's a lot of different angles, and a lot of different ways you can tell it.
Right.
Sometimes it's loosely based on the facts, and sometimes it's strictly based on the facts. As an archaeologist, I should say strictly based on the facts because that's what I'm supposed to do as a scientist, but there's a lot of storytelling in archaeology too.
Indeed, there is.
Yes.
All right. So what historical figure lived in South Mountain in Phoenix?
I tried to throw you guys for a loop there again. So letter D is I'itoi. And I'itoi goes by a number of names in O'odham legends, but he's the figure that is often called elder brother in the Hist-O-Cam legends. And it's believed that he lived inside of South Mountain, and that the mountains perhaps were like a maze to find I'itoi. I think that's really cool. I'm glad you found the picture to put up there. That's, of course, the symbol from the Salt River Pima Maricopa Indian community, but that is representative. The man in the maze is generally representative, or could be seen as representative of I'itoi in his house. There's a number of pieces of rock art. If you ever get to explore South Mountain Park, there's a number of pieces of rock art there that show what appear to be maze-like images with a figure standing in the doorway or standing inside of it. And one of the ideas is that these images also represent I'itoi in his house. Now, I'itoi was this colossal figure in O'odham history, and he's a god, but he's the person that he not only creates the Hist-O-Cam were there, but when their ways turn wicked, he's also instrumental in their destruction. And there's a lot of elements in those old stories that, as archaeologists, and you look back at the archaeological record and what happened, there are answers in the oral histories that were handed down that kind of match similarly and eerily similarly what we see in the archaeological record. So again, it's another reminder that those oral histories are history too. Maybe they're not written down in the same way and chronicled by people exactly as they happened, but they're stories that are so important that they're handed down, and they're still really significant. So I was happy to throw that one in there. Sorry, throw everyone for a loop if you didn't get it.
No, but I think that's great. And it's such a true fact that especially with those marginalized communities that didn't have access to print and things like that at this point, it was like those oral traditions really held out, and in some cases into the 1900s. Mm-hmm. I mean, and so you really have oral history being the best source of so much of that history that was passed on.
And I have to say, those traditions are still alive, and there are still traditional practitioners in the Gila River Indian community, the Salt River Pima Maricopa Indian community, who are still telling these stories and passing them down. And yes, you can go out and buy that that great book and read a version of them. But a lot of these stories are still, in large part, unwritten and handed down in traditional ways. So if you ever get to go to these storytelling events, I know they do them periodically on both of the Indian communities, where you can go and listen to some of the people who are traditional practitioners and are knowledgeable in these stories. When it's the right time of year and it's time to tell the stories, you can go and hear these stories, and they're just absolutely compelling and wonderful.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it's so worth doing, because there is so much more communicated than just the written word of just all the symbolism, the meter of how they're telling the story, the volume. And so they can really draw you into those stories. So it's so worth it to go hear somebody actually tell those stories. All right. And so, which is a ghost canal, which has been filled in, but traces of it can still be spotted throughout the valley?
Yeah, so all of them, although that was probably a pretty easy answer there. But all of those canals that have been filled in and they're no longer used, or in some cases have been filled in and they're still used because the water goes through a pipe instead of through an open ditch, can really be spotted around the valley. And this is a topic I explored just this past February. I gave a discussion at the Pueblo Grande Museum about these ghost canals, and particularly the Maricopa Canal, which you can see in the picture there on the screen, and the Salt River Valley Canal, and how you can still spot the remains of these canals around town if you just are kind of perceptive to what you're looking at. We live on a grid. Everything's north, south, east, west in Phoenix, and anytime anything deviates from that grid for some reason, is usually a really interesting story to tell. And so if you follow the route of where the Maricopa Canal was, you'll see there are strange buildings on angles and streets that end in dead ends or take weird 90-degree or 45-degree turns. And there's a couple of really good examples throughout Phoenix that you can still find. Just north of St. Luke's Hospital, Via Street is on a diagonal for no reason other than the Salt River Valley Canal ran along it. And the picture you have there, that's probably one of the last remnants of the Maricopa Canal that can be seen today. That's at the Phoenix Greyhound Park parking lot. So it's like almost 40th Street and just south of Washington.
Okay, because I was like, I could tell it was a parking lot, but I was like, where? I mean, I was like, other than like Metro Center, what has such a big parking lot? So that makes so much sense. It's the Greyhound Park.
It's the Greyhound Park, and actually that area is slated for development as part of the airport expansion in the next few years. So we're going to wind up losing that one more than likely. But while it's out there, you can see it. I managed to catch it on a rainy day there with a little bit of water pulled in it, but you could see they just paved the parking lot right through the old canal there. And most of the rest of it you can't spot anymore. There's a little bit of it next to the Celebrity Theater if you've ever been out there, and there's a weird dirt alley that goes off in a weird direction out there, and that's part of the same canal.
Oh, really? Because I'm actually trying to get them to be one of the guests as well, because of just their own history. I'm wondering how many of even the staff know that alley behind them is a canal.
Yeah, I don't know. There's another street called Randolph Street, which actually runs right into the Celebrity Theater there too. That Randolph Street is one of the odd streets in Phoenix that doesn't follow the grid. So yeah, there are those non-grid stories, and that's another thing. I'd love to explore that someday. But if you ever, I think you're in this neighborhood like I am, Marshall. But if you drive up 7th Avenue and you get to Melrose and there's a curve in the road. Why is there a curve in the road? And there is a really great story, and I'm not an expert on it, so I won't tell it. But there's a really great story as to why.
So what is your version of the story? Because I have my own version of the story, which I haven't been able to track down yet. But what is your version?
Well, yeah, and I can't track mine down yet either because I haven't done the research on it. But my version of the story is that there was an error in the surveyors who were platting out 7th Avenue, and they corrected it when they got to Melrose because they needed to connect the street to the north to the street to the south, and they weren't going to line up on a straight line.
See, I think there's a little bit more to it than that, because I was looking at I think it was like a 1910 map, and so basically the
coming north on 7th
ran right into someone's farm. So I made it skirt the farm because they didn't want to lose the corner of their farm.
Oh, that's a totally different story. Yeah, I don't know. Again, I haven't looked into it.
Right. And so I keep meaning to get down to preservation and say, okay, let's try and track this down. It's like who owned that plot, and let's see what we if they would have had enough pull back then to get the road to go around them. But I did find that it wasn't that sharp of a curve until the 50s when Womack actually started developing that neighborhood. And as part of it, made that more undulating curve that we now see, as opposed to really just kind of a sharp turn, like 2 90-degree turns.
Well, it did its job. It created a retail anchor in a place that's memorable in the otherwise streets of Phoenix, right? So,
exactly. I mean, because we love those streets that are not on the true and narrow, straight and narrow.
Yes.
I mean, like Grand Avenue, which has its own history as well, which is pretty.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So, all right. So, what is the title of a person who ensures water is delivered through all those canals?
Right. So C, Zanjero is the answer there. And I put a few other words in there that all kind of mean the same thing. So Zanjero roughly translates into a word that means ditch master. So the word ditch rider was a term that was used in early Phoenix to describe the people because they rode in horses along the ditches to make sure that the gates were open in time to irrigate the next person down the line. Water master is another word that has been used. In New Mexico, they use a word called mayordomo, which really means, governor or something equivalent to that. But here in Phoenix and parts of Southern California and in very few other places, the word Zanjero is the word that's used for people who control irrigation ditches. And I find that something really fascinating because I tried to do a little bit of etymological research there and figure out what the source of that word is. And I haven't quite finished that yet, but from what I understand, Zanjero is a very archaic Spanish word. So at the time Mexicans were coming here and settling the valley, the contemporary Spanish would not have used the word Zanjero, which comes from the Spanish zanjer, which means ditch. The word they used for ditch was acequia. And so it was a strange word that found its way here. And it suggests some really interesting ideas to maybe who the first Zanjeros might have been. That word Zanjer likely comes from Persian or Arabic, and we know that the folks that are living in southern Spain are learning to irrigate their fields with canals from Arabs and from the Moors who were living in southern Spain at the time. And so one of the ideas that's going around in my head, and again, this is an unwritten history, but something I'd like to find out more about, just don't have the written material yet, is when Swilling and company decide they're going to show up and dig out these canals and they fill them with water, I don't think they have a clue what to do at that point. They're all miners or soldiers or drunk English guys. They don't know what to do, and so I think they go on the south side of the river, the South Phoenix, and they go and ask a couple of Mexicans, well, do you know what to do here? And eventually they produce somebody who came from Mexico, maybe from Mexico City, where they have a lot of canals, or from Western Mexico, where they're using canals in the river, who has this deep inherited knowledge that they maybe brought over from Spain, maybe during the Spanish Reformation, and they've retained these old archaic terms and brought them here to the Southwest, where they proliferate now. Again, that's just a hypothesis, but I think it's one of those great examples of there might be an unwritten history and story here that we don't know that's survived in the use of a particular word for a particular job.
Now, also in the answer, you also have in quotations the A, which is the feminine. Does that mean they were female kind of water masters?
There were female Zanjeras. There might actually still be Zanjeras, and I apologize, I did not talk to my colleagues at SRP to check that one out. But there were quite a few. I want to say a majority of them, but there were a few Zanjeras over the years. Yes.
Oh, very cool. And then Gloria says her grandfather was one of SRP's Zanjeros.
Excellent.
Yeah. Now, Gloria's great. She's got tons of stories. Oh, my God. All right. So question 9, we're almost at the end. All right. So what is the oldest continually used canal on the SRP system?
Right, and so that's A, the Tempe Canal. And I threw in there a few others. The Salt River Valley Canal, which was choice B, was actually was probably one of the first, if not the first, of the canals that were refurbished. The old Hohokam canals that were brought back to life. But of course, it hasn't been continuously used, and it's been abandoned since and filled in since the 1920s, right? And I threw a few other things in there to throw you off. But yeah, the Tempe Canal, the official answer, this is the Bureau of Reclamation and SRP will tell you that Tempe Canal is the oldest continuously used canal on SRP's system. Although there are older canals that are hanging around. They may not have been used continuously, but maybe they're partially still in use. Now, the Tempe Canal has this really great history that I won't completely tell because I think it would be hours and hours of really interesting water politics to talk about. But the first
water politics, just in general, is amazing in Arizona.
It is. It's fascinating stuff, and I'm just, I'm really at the beginning of my career at SRP still, so I'm learning all that stuff, and I'm going to be learning it over the next 20 years certainly. But that canal, the Tempe Canal, was built between 1870 and 1871 by some of the same characters as built the Salt River Valley Canal on the north side, but also by this guy named Hayden. We've all heard of Hayden, Charles Hayden, who shows up here, and he's one of the major players in that too. And there were a number of branches to this canal, but the oldest parts of those were the ones that brought water from the Salt River and back up to the Hayden flour mill, which the successor of the original flour mill is still there on Mill Avenue in Tempe. There are two bits of that canal that still convey water that are still there to this day that are actually designated by the Bureau of Reclamation as historic canals. There's one that's usually referred to as the Kirkland-McKinney Ditch. It's just off of University Drive in an empty lot there. And there's one at the corner of Rural Road and University that's actually the site of a ASU building that's going up right now. And that was a little bit of an issue because, of course, ASU owned the property around it. There was this little canal going through this dirty, unlined dirt canal, and ASU wanted to build a building over it and pipe it. But because this is an important part of our history, they worked closely with SRP and the Bureau of Reclamation to cantilever the building over the canal. And the canal is actually being incorporated into the lobby of the building, and I believe it's an engineering science building, and so it's going to have water flowing through the lobby with riparian plants and things, but it's still going to be a functioning canal sitting there, and I think that's going to be really cool. I can't wait till that opens. I want to go down and see that because I haven't seen my own eyes on that yet, but that's a really cool thing they're doing there. One more thing I'd like to say about that is I said the official answer is the Tempe Canal, but I'd like to put an exception in there, and again, this is part of the theme of what I'm talking about today, is that one of the things we don't understand about this is a second canal that starts in Tempe and goes into South Phoenix that's called the San Francisco Canal. And you may not see that on a lot of maps these days. It's not an SRP canal anymore. We actually use parts of it as lateral canals that deliver water from a main canal to farm dishes or to people's property. And this was in its early days known as the Mexican Canal, and its history is not real well understood. It may have been dug as early as 1870 or maybe a little bit earlier, but because that history is not written, we don't really know. So, the official answer is the canal built by Charles Hayden is the one that gets the billing as the oldest continuously used, yet the San Francisco Canal, also continuously used since that time, may be older. And that's one of those things where we really need to understand the history of the Hispanics that lived on the south side of Phoenix a lot better than we actually do. Their history is just not as well recorded for us. And I think that's really important because what happens to those Hispanics in South Phoenix, as I understand, is that they're not very successful farmers down there. The canal washes out a lot. They have trouble maintaining it. They're not having a lot of good crop yields down there. And this guy comes in named Wormser, and he's actually this French Jewish immigrant who winds up in Arizona. And he took complete advantage of the people down there and started selling the seeds to them and then requiring that they give back part of their yield in payment for the seeds. So basically started a culture that the Hispanics who were living there could never quite get out of. And a lot of those Hispanic farmers lost their farms to Wormser, who amassed this great bit of land and died without leaving a will. And that land was purchased by Dwight Heard and became part of the Heard Cattle Ranch. And so there's this really interesting history. We talk about Wormser and Heard as these pioneers who settled South Phoenix and made big ranch land out of it. But there's another story behind that that's not as well told. So that's every one of my questions you can see here has a little bit of a bent. Just
Well,
trying
no,
to
I mean, and it's like, and
uncover.
also when you brought up the term lateral, it was like, I mean, it's like if you look back at some of the old things, it's like I've seen, it's like, oh, it's on lateral 16 or 54. And you've then got to go back through, and it's like instead of street names, they use those laterals as locators.
Yes.
So there's kind of an approximation of how you can kind of guess where things are, but it's still interesting looking at that.
Yep.
And then
the canal system is fascinating, to be honest with you.
Well, and then Gloria is also saying that there is a substation named for her grandfather, Guy Pinkerton, at 165th Street and Rio Verde Drive.
Oh, I've seen that one on maps, and I haven't been there, but that's good to know. SRP does name its substations and facilities after folks who have retired from SRP. I think it's almost always folks who have passed away, and it's an honorarium for them.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah.
All right, and so we are now to our very last question, sadly. So what picturesque road stood in for the Burma Road in that 1960 film, The Mountain Road, starring Jimmy Stewart?
Yeah, so this is a really cool, and I only just recently learned this, but and this was because we had commissioned a consulting firm to come in and do an archaeological survey of Horse Mesa Road, and Horse Mesa Road is the road that leads from the Apache Trail down to one of SRP's hydroelectric generating stations and dams at Horse Mesa. So you've probably never been there. Most of the road is closed, but it's this absolutely stunning road that takes you from the top of basically in the Superstition Mountains down to the Salt River through a series of unpaved switchbacks, and it's absolutely gorgeous. And that road washed out in a lot of places last year during the big rainstorms in the early winter, and so we have to go in there and repair it. And we commissioned an archaeological survey to go out there and make sure we knew what was out there, and we knew this road was important, but we didn't know a lot about it. So the archaeologists and historians at our consulting firm SWCA went out there and did a lot of research, and they uncovered this this movie that happened. And so the archaeologists there said, "Hey, did you know a movie happened out here?" Well, I went to my colleagues at SRP Archives, and of course they knew about it. But it was a really neat thing to learn that they were using this road because it was so dramatic looking as a stand-in for the Burma Road, and also as a place where they built a movie set. And the remnants of that movie set are still visible on the ground today. And had we not known that there was a movie there in the past, the archaeologists walking out there were wondering what happened. Was there some sort of camp here at some point in the past? Did somebody build buildings here that were torn down? And so it's really neat to kind of have that answer so neatly put together. And by the way, if you're interested in seeing that, you can go ahead and Google the Mountain Road. The entire movie is online on YouTube. I believe it's in the public domain now. And you can watch it on there. One interesting thing about that movie, if you really like Jimmy Stewart like I do, it's kind of cool to see him, but he didn't do a lot of war movies after the war. It was something that he didn't want to do. He didn't necessarily agree with a lot of the politics in the post-war era, but he chose to make this one because it didn't necessarily show the U.S. Army in a good light. So it was made during the 60s, and it was just a little bit more casting a critical eye on the U.S. military. And so this was the one movie he did actually do. So he was trouncing around out there just east of Apache Junction on this road filming back in probably 1959 or so.
Wow, very cool.
Yeah.
So Dan, I want to thank you so much for being here. Oh my gosh, and sharing so many stories with us.
Happy to be here.
I've learned a lot. I'm sure so many folks out there listening and watching have learned as well. So really kind of, it's like, that's why I love doing this, is because there's always more to the story.
Well, thanks for having me. This is really fun, and I hope everybody enjoyed.
Thank you. All right. Well, have a great rest of your night. I
will. You too, sir.
And enjoy that last bit of wine.
I will, and thank you all. I'm sorry I haven't been following on in the comments, but I see there's all sorts of good stuff. So maybe Marshall will leave me in here for a few more minutes to grab a look at what everybody's said.
As long as you want. So
thank you, sir.
Bye, Dan.
All right, bye-bye.
All right, so now we come up to our Little Arizona segment, which is a lot of fun. And so one of the things I've started actually doing is asking guests what are their favorite small towns. So really looking at towns that are like 1,000 people or less. And so when I asked Dan, we started talking about it, and he suggested a town I'd only seen signs for. Now, the whole reason why doing this is because I'm supposed to be working on a book, and I don't know quite now if that's going to happen. It's like the publisher is saying, well, the timing, who knows? So I don't know if there's going to be a book called Little Arizona, but I am having so much fun kind of delving down and just getting the chance to research some of these small towns and love learning about them. And so today we're going to talk about Stanton. So, and actually let's go for a little bit larger so you might actually be able to read that sign. So Stanton, Arizona was originally called Antelope Station and wasn't a huge deal until you had a group of explorers camping out, and one of them is said to have decided to go chase a burro. And as he was chasing that burro, he stumbled on what he thought were potatoes. Come to find out they were gold nuggets that big, just sitting on top. And so because of that, that area became known as Rich Hill. And suddenly, back in 1863, the town exploded. And within 5 years, that very few handful of folks suddenly exploded to 3,500 people, 3,500 people. Now, with them was also a man named Chuck Stanton. So Chuck came to Antelope Station and started kind of getting involved with nefarious folks trying to take over the town. And indeed, he did wind up taking over the town, and hence it's now named after him. Now, what I think is interesting was that it's got so many layers of history, because then in the 50s, the Saturday Evening Post winds up purchasing like half the town and gives it away in a jingle contest. I was trying to actually find the jingle that won someone half the town of Stanton, Arizona, but sadly, I couldn't find much more about that winner. So I figured, that's what it's like. If anyone out there knows anything about that part of the story, would love to hear that, would love to maybe even play the jingle, if we can get a copy of that. So after that, the owners didn't know quite what to do with their half the town, so they wound up selling it. But then, kind of like Jerome, those darn hippies moved in. And so from there, it then wound up being purchased. What I think is really cool, it then wound up being purchased by the Lost Dutchman Mining Association. And so they have mining spots across the country that they've turned into RV parks. So basically, the Lost Dutchman has turned this into a private RV park where people can go and live for 6 months at a stretch and go hang out. And they have explorations where you can go dig. And so that's the thing, is people are still finding things out there, which I think is really cool that they've incorporated all that. And so here is one of their nights where they have a campfire in the middle of town and everyone just kind of gathers and hangs out. So I think that's really cool. And Dan, do you have anything to add to this story? Let's bring Dan back.
Oh, I'm back. Hey, no, nothing in particular to add there. Stanton is one of those places where, in years of consulting work and traveling around the state, you stumble across these places that you never realized were there. It's a dot on the map and a crossroads, but just to be standing there and realize that the hill just north of Stanton is Rich Hill, the first gold deposit discovered in Arizona that starts the Little Arizona Gold Rush. The thing that brings a lot of the early Arizona pioneers, people like Jack Swilling here. It was a great place to be. If you're there, by the way, I strongly recommend that you take a left when you get to town and you head up the old highway. So you can take Highway 89, I believe it is, from Wickenburg up to Yarnell and then off to Prescott. But if you go through the town of Stanton, you can take the predecessor to Highway 89, which is this really harrowing experience to drive up. There's no guardrails, there's no pavement. In some places, you definitely want a little bit of clearance on your vehicle, but it's a great drive, and you'll really deserve that drink and burger when you get to Yarnell at the top.
Wow. I wonder if my little car will make it. That I may have to chance that once we're able to go out and kind of socialize a bit more, because I don't want to do that alone.
No, you definitely want a little bit of clearance. My car doesn't have that much clearance, and it did it fine, but you need a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and Dan, so I do want to say, so some folks out there have said, I only got 3 out of 10. But as we've said in the past, it's like, it's not about how much you know coming in, but now you know those stories. And you were so great about bringing in so many different threads into the stories.
Well, thanks. I'm glad that you appreciate it. I hope everybody enjoyed the questions. I enjoyed putting them together. So, maybe we'll have to do this again at some point. Although it's going to take me a while to come up with some new ones.
Oh, my gosh. No, I would love to have you back on talking about a whole different set of things.
Yeah, you'll have to give me a little time to generate some new material for us.
No worries. Happy to do that. All right. Yeah. I'm going to go ahead and take you off now.
Bye.
Bye. All right. So now remember, if you want to reach out, if you have questions, stories, you can reach out via this chat session. You can also reach out if you have stories you would like to share. You can do that on Facebook through Marshall Hip Historian, or also email at hello@hiphistorian.com. Now, also, there is my Venmo at the very top. So feel free. And I'm happy to say, so next week we have another Dan on. Actually, Mike is on. I was like, wait a minute. So Mike is on, and he is going to talk about tiki history of Arizona. He did a program last year for Arizona Tiki Oasis about kind of that Southwest tiki experience. And so it was like, how much fun to just focus on places like the islands, Kon-Tiki, some of the, it's like out in Scottsdale. You had so much tiki, and there's still some fair amount of tiki around the state. So getting a chance to talk about that. So that's going to be fun. And I'm sure we'll have an amazing cocktail with that. So also right now, as part of Maricopa County Library District, they're a summer reading program. If you go on, we just uploaded and going live, I think through the 9th, is Arizona Movies, Western to Pop Culture. So I did not squeeze in the movie we talked about, but there were so many movies shot across Arizona that there's no one way you could talk about all of them in one fell swoop. And so this is just kind of a small gathering of selected films, kind of talking about those with some of those trailers and some of the stories behind the scenes. So if you were interested in seeing that, you can go on to read20az.com. And from there, you can click on and sign up and see a program that I've recorded for them. And I think that is good through the 9th. And also coming up on the 3rd Saturday, as part of Arizona Virtual Pride, I'm doing a program called That's Entertainment, Arizona LGBTQ plus history, really talking about screen and stage history, which, I often say, let's do this and then start learning so much once I get my feet into it. And it's like, well, I found that. What else can I find? And learning a new term and starting to research that. And so it's going to be a lot of fun to put together. And I was shocked how early some of that history goes. And then, October is right around the corner. Now, normally Deb and I would have a school bus full of people going around talking about stories. We've been talking about how to handle that at this moment. So there will be some sort of a virtual component, still talking about what that's going to look like. So it's going to be really interesting. And we might cover more than just downtown Phoenix. We might be able to explore areas across the state. But we'll let you know more about that as it happens. So again, I want to thank you all so much for being here. Now, remember, it wouldn't happen without the support of so many of you out there. Thank you so much for helping in that. As well as we do have AARP of Arizona as a sponsor. And as they say, the coronavirus continues to affect us all. We may be apart, but we are not alone. AARP is here in Arizona, providing information that can help you and your family. So there is their website, aarp.org/AZ, if you would like to see some of the programs they have coming up. They're doing a lot of things virtually, so it's worth checking out their roster of events just to see what's happening. Thank you all so much. And there again are how to reach out to me. And thank you all so much and have a great rest of your night.